The halls of the Wicked Anvil bustled with activity. The dwarves worked to clear the remnants of last episode's siege. Once a gauntlet of death for the invaders, the trap hallways now littered with the enemy corpses and twisted bits of goblin armor. This is a grim harvest, but a necessary one. Every scrap of metal is destined for the forges, where the fires of dwarven industry will breathe new life into the recovered materials and forge them into weapons of war for the dwarves. The cost of this victory was steep. The militia squads, the Hammerbanes, and the Thunder Spears fought hard to defend the Wicked Anvil. But even the strongest of steel bends beneath the unrelenting tides of enemies. Many dwarves fell that day, their names etched forever in the records of the fortress's history, and yet, among the chaos and carnage, a figure stands tall. A symbol of dwarven leadership, a hero forged right here in the Wicked Anvil. Since he took up the banner of the Hammerbanes and the leadership of the armies of the fortress, the 91-year-old dwarf Ezum has carved his name into the history of dwarven kind. 43 foes have fallen beneath his blade in the name of the Wicked Anvil. Goblins, trolls, and far worse have tested him, and all have failed. He is the hammer that is swung by our King Monum in this battle between two ancestral enemies. Years ago, this fortress was founded. 8 strong dwarves were sent out to create a fortress that would not only serve as an impenetrable wall against the goblins of the maligning monster, but also as an assaulting spearhead for the dwarven military to launch attacks from. After the king arrived at the Wicked Anvil, the war effort was tripled. The dwarves sent multiple raids out to begin exterminating the goblin forces nearby, with the goblins counterattacking often and with increased numbers. King Monum and the Anvil commander Ezum have decided to put this war to an end. The goblin fortresses must fall. Operation Reclaim the Mountainhomes has begun. Preparing for war is no easy task. The dwarves that run the fortress's industry are hard at work at all times. They know the goals of the king and will stop at nothing to supply him with tools and supplies needed for the campaign. Just below the main industry level of the fortress, the dwarves have been busy channeling water into large pools and constructing a huge project. They are hoping to power the fortress and many future projects by using the very water source that flows within the caverns. Though it's a daunting task, the engineering dwarves have said they've eyeballed it a couple times, and the king trusts them. Many moons have passed since the last siege. The cleanup has taken longer than expected in the trap hallway. The corpses have rotted away into bone-white skeletons. The stench of warfare is long gone, but the dwarves still search for their missing kind amongst the bones. A few of dwarven blood were lost, unrecognizable from enemy remains at this point. These dwarves were slain by the goblins, which would leave any honorable dwarf unhappy in the afterlife. An upset dwarf almost always comes back as a ghost, now which the fortress is having issues with. As quickly as the king could, he ordered the stoneworkers to carve memorials into slabs, to lay the lost soldiers in eternal rest. The fortress had seen months of hardship, months of standing alone against the goblin war machine. Finally, it seemed like they caught a break, a brief distraction from the pain. The mountainhomes arrived with supplies and handcrafted items from the fortresses to the west. Though it was not all good news, the goblin forces had found new routes through the mountains, finding passages that allowed them to bypass the Wicked Anvil, and they had brought ruin to many dwarven hillocks and fortresses in the dwarven homelands. This infuriated the king and the Anvil commander Ezum, who both took to the war room to talk over strategy. The mountainhomes brought steel armor, weapons, fine clothes, new tools, seeds and food, and stacks of books written by the dwarven record keepers, all of which were traded for with masterfully crafted bone craft goods, fine wine and ale, and prepared food from the legendary Wicked Anvil cooks. As the surface bustled with trade and feasting, below the surface picks rang out against the stone. The war machine needed fuel. Limestone was cut from the caverns to aid in the production of steel for new weapons and armor. A brewer named Kogan was inspired by the sudden happiness of the fortress. She took off to the nearest forge and crafted an artifact nickel crossbow, which she dedicated to the Wicked Anvil, a fine weapon named Kafashagam, decorated with donkey bone, bands of nickel, and bloodstones, and for some reason, a picture of a cabinet. Peace in the Wicked Anvil is never more than an illusion. As the dwarves toiled to rebuild, war came knocking on its door once more. This time, the dwarves were in for a surprise. Trolls emerged, not in a mindless rage like usual, but with eerie purpose. They lumbered towards the fortress, their hulking forms smashing through the shrubbery on the surface. The dwarves had seen this before. The trap hallway had always been their salvation against these beasts. But this time, the trolls did not fall for the traps. Their massive forms weaved through the traps as if guided by unseen hands. They dodged swinging blades, stepped past pressure plates, and emerged unscathed. The dwarves' deadliest defenses had failed. The trolls were now inside. Steel met flesh in the halls of the Wicked Anvil. The trolls had broken through. There was no time to rally, no time to think. The militia had to fight, or watch the defenseless kin within the fortress be torn apart. Many of these soldiers were new to war, recruits, fresh from training. They had only seen battle and drills, and their armor was still polished, their hands unfamiliar to the weight of the steel, and one by one, they fell. Then came Fath, one of the last veterans of the Hammerbane squad. She stood alone against the tide of trolls. Her axe carved through flesh and bone, her shield shattered, her armor cracked, but she did not falter. Blow after blow, she held the line. The trolls came and she laid them low, protecting the recruits behind her. But even a mountain wears down under the storm. Her body broke, her blood pooled at her feet, and yet she still swung her axe. When the last troll fell, so did she. The dwarves carried her to the Healing Lords. Her fate was uncertain. A new cleanup order was issued. Recruits were buried in the tombs, and the industry fired back up within the fortress. The new water wheel project was brought online. The slow cranking of the pumps eventually turned into a continuous hum of engines within the cavern. A new trading post was constructed of solid gold, after the attacking trolls had destroyed the last stone one, a true testament to the wealth and determination of the dwarves within the fortress. Inspired by the effort of her fellow dwarves, a weaponsmith named Zuntir crafted something magnificent. A copper battle axe was forged within the halls and gifted to the king. The axe was named Elash Artab and was encrusted with beautiful stones. Stone rings hung from its handle, and menacing spikes protruded from the axe itself. An image of a dwarf named Rith Hatchetflag was carved into hematite on the weapon. That's a little bit better than a cabinet. That's what I'm talking about. The war for the mountainhomes has begun. King Monum, first of his name, called upon his legendary warrior and the Anvil commander Ezum. The goblins must face a fury of dwarven steel if they wish to push into the homelands. Ezum and 2 squads of now trained up soldiers marched west into the settlement of Razorshaft. The goblins must have been watching as the 2 squads left for Razorshaft. With just a few soldiers behind, the goblins once again attacked, sending trolls up the trap hallway. Only 4 military dwarves remained in the fortress. The king called for them to return to the trap hallway and defend the fortress. It was almost certain that the dwarves would lose this one. The trolls and the goblins would make it all the way into the fortress after going through just a handful of recruits. Once again, the beast lumbered down the trap hallway, dodging every single trap. 2 recruits knew what needed to be done, and they rushed forward and started slaying trolls one by one. It wasn't long before the first recruit fell. The second one backpedaled through the corridors, fighting the trolls as they rushed forward. Despite the valiant effort, this recruit also fell. With one of the last recruits finally making it to the trap hallway, and knowing he was going to be one of the last defenses between the trolls and the fortress, he rushed down the corridor himself. That's when he heard it. Not goblins, not trolls, but the return of the Hammerbanes and the Thunder Spears. They pivoted halfway through their trail and returned to the Wicked Anvil. The trained soldiers rushed into the trap hallway, pinning the trolls between the recruit and themselves. Quickly, they cut down the trolls. Not another dwarf was lost in the fight. The goblins, sitting on the edge of the territory, once again retreated, defeated. The recruits held off just long enough for the veterans to return. The dwarves once thought that they would lose the fortress. The king thought the dwarves defeated, but once again the Wicked Anvil stands strong. With the goblins at the Wicked Anvil finally defeated, the King Monum and the Anvil commander Ezum decided it was time to send a message. Once again, Ezum, the Hammerbanes, and the Thunder Spears marched to Razorshaft in the west. This was once a bustling dwarven colony, but was now controlled by the goblins. Ezum and the 2 squads of steel-clad military dwarves wiped the town clean of the goblin scum, making sure that none of them made it out. The dwarves of the Wicked Anvil were seeking revenge. The goblin plot to bypass the Wicked Anvil and its defenses and attack the homelands absolutely disgusted the dwarves. Now it was time for them to strike back. The first step was to clear the homelands of old goblin invaders. Then, with the homeland's support and under King Monum's orders, to push into the goblin territory to wipe this side of the continent clean. The war has only just begun. I hope you guys have been enjoying this. The Wicked Anvil has been one of my favorite playthroughs and one of the ones I've been probably the most interested in editing because I've learned a whole bunch of editing since I started this. If you guys have been around since my Hall of Shores playthrough, which is really great if you want to go check it out, it's here on my channel, it's the full story. But as I got through that, I started learning a lot more editing. I'm all self-taught, so I taught myself through that, and then I taught myself a lot of recent Foxhole videos, and now I'm back into Dwarf Fortress as I take a little break from Foxhole. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I've earned a like, comment, and a subscription from you. I want to say thank you so much to the over 3,100 of you that have subscribed to my channel. This is absolutely mind-boggling. My channel has seen like exponential growth in the past 6 months or so, and I just want to say thank you guys so much. I really, really, really appreciate it. If you want to join the Legion or join our community, there's a link tree down below where you can find not only my shop and a couple other socials, but a Discord where you can hop in there with a handful of other people from the community and we can talk about Dwarf Fortress or Foxhole or whatever else we got going on. I play a lot of games, so you always see me on something different. But if you want to get in touch with me or you want to join the Legion, that's where you'll find us. So once again, thank you so much for checking out this video. I really, really hope you enjoyed it. There should be plenty more coming, and I hope to see you in those future projects. Peace.